ziua, doamnelor și domnilor! Eu sunt 𝐕𝐈𝐑𝐓𝐔𝐀 și vă rog să-mi permiteți ca în numele Asociației CIO Council România, Asociația Directorilor de IT și Comunicații, să vă mulțumesc că sunteți astăzi la a treia zi a conferinței CIO Council Virtual Summit 2020. Avem o zi plină de profesioniști autentici. În a treia zi vom discuta despre ceea ce înseamnă Digital Business Transformation în această perioadă incertă, în această perioadă a noului normal, în această perioadă, așa cum am numit-o la început, VUCA, plină de volatilitate, ambiguitate, complexitate, incertitudine. Vom astăzi. Dacă am vorbit despre trenduri și tehnologie în prima zi și cyber, astăzi începem cu Digital Business Transformation. Mulțumim din nou partenerilor noștri, față de care altfel nu am fi reușit să realizăm acest eveniment în pandemie, din păcate pe online, dar prin online reușim să aducem speaker de seamă și le mulțumim foarte mult partenerilor supporting partners Orange și Dell și, desigur, partenerilor Romsim Data, NNDKP, Bitnet, Dendrio, ING, Matricia, CertSign, Samsung, Kaspersky și Huawei. Am să vă invit pe fiecare dintre noastre să vizitați și standurile și secțiunea de networking pe care am pus-o la dispoziție pentru dumneavoastră. Există posibilitatea să interacționați cu peers-ii dumneavoastră. Sunt peste, dacă nu mă înșel, 500 de profesioniști IT înregistrați, dintre care, dacă nu mă înșel, cel puțin 250 sunt CIO sau IT manager, nu doar din România. Vă invit să-i depistați, să-i căutați, inclusiv pe membrii CIO Council, și să vă angajați în discuții. Partenerii noștri au pregătit o suită întreagă de standuri în care puteți găsi foarte multe, în zona de Expo Area, găsiți foarte multe informații utile și aveți șansa să interacționați, inclusiv prin video chat, cu reprezentanții fiecărui partener. Vom începe ziua de astăzi cu una dintre companiile pe care o apreciez personal foarte mult. Este vorba despre McKinsey. Este, dacă vă mărturisesc sincer, una dintre principalele surse de inspirație ale mele personal, ca și CIO. I will switch in English right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us today. It is our great pleasure to have on board with CIO Council National Conference one of the companies which I really like, I personally really like a lot. It's about McKinsey Digital. It's a company which has a lot of resources, extremely useful for the business and IT community. And their representative today at CIO Council National Conference is Mr. Anton Fortunatov, Associate Partner, McKinsey Digital Prague. Anton, please, thank you very much for being with us. And I'm passing you the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak with you. Today, we wanted to share a perspective with you. Okay, we wanted to share a bit of a perspective on what we see in terms of changing customer behaviors and their expectations. I think, in light of COVID, there's a bit of an acceleration. And explore some of the things that we can do, right, to kind of meet customer expectation and probably some internal demands within the organizations. Okay, so we ran not too long ago a survey. We ran globally in multiple regions, but obviously, of course, across Central Europe as well. To understand how trends are changing, whether to see whether there is a difference in the way people are interacting with organizations based on the new normal, so to speak. We'll have a virtual conference. So on the first page, we have an overview of how digital adoption is has actually changed in the last few months. And if we look at CE broadly, we see that actually there's quite a high number of people who are interacting through digital channels with most services, right? And this is probably true across the world, right? Especially in more developed economies, and certainly very much present in Central Europe. And in Romania, so 2 out of 3 Romanians are actually engaging with digital services, right? It's a vast proportion, and the question will come is how do we make sure we meet that demand? Because in COVID, what we see is that the usage has more than doubled almost, right? There's probably going to be a persistent change, because we've been doing this for long enough now that this is habit forming. It becomes habit forming. People become accustomed to new ways of interacting, and this will stay to an extent, right? Obviously, not everything, as we know, but a lot of these habits will stay. And what we can do is we can have a look on the next page, the variant sense we actually see. So it's not uniform, right? We can certainly say that the increase in digital channel usage has been true across most industries, right? But of course, it's not necessarily uniform. And we can probably put that down to capabilities in certain areas, because certain industries are usually slightly more advanced in the digital space than others, but also demand. I think the outlier is travel, probably one of the sectors that's not doing as well as it could be right now. Yeah. But predominantly there is an increase. There is an increase, and it means different things for different sectors. It means different kind of services and offerings. But I think the universal truth will be that there will be a demand. There will be a demand on the organizations. There'll be a demand from customers and from the business to keep up with this change in behavior, and to actually enable more services and more products digitally as a baseline, right? And then, of course, typically when you start changing things, there's a space for innovation. And that innovation can take different forms, and it's almost like opening a Pandora's box. But I think there are a few things to consider, because demands will come on organizations. There will be a need for change, and there are a few things that we can do now to actually start making the changes, because I think we see it now across Europe, certainly where cases are going up. Potentially there will be measures taken. I think some travel restrictions are coming in now across Europe. So there is a possibility that there will be an even bigger demand for these services. And in order to cope with the customer demand, in order to cope with the internal kind of pressures that we'll all see in organizations, especially on the technology space, there are probably some levers we can look at. We've got those on the next page, just at a high level. Obviously, shifting services to digital channels. We don't necessarily have everything in the digital space, but we should. Trying to actually get more of the end-to-end services and channels. I think what I've seen, at least with the clients I've worked in, is that we don't necessarily present the full product kind of life cycle, or full journey life cycle to customers and make them available in digital channels. Maybe now we should. I think a lot of the interactions. So I work in banking more than anything else, and a lot of the interactions that we see that are happening now are more day-to-day interactions. Servicing, balance checking, kind of the administrative side of things. And that's not necessarily as advanced as some industries. So really kind of completing the journey end to end. I think being data driven, right? Making decisions based on data that we see rather than hunches or feelings, I think is critical. especially when time and resources are in question fundamentally. And also then there's a bit of an innovation space. Yeah. So which products, how do they work? How do products change fundamentally when they're in a different space away from the physical? Right. And there are a couple of enablers for that. I think they're relatively straightforward. I think, really it's about people on the one side, and ways of working, how those people work, how they interact and things like that. And also the technologies and the platforms and the infrastructure that we use in order to actually support the services, the speed and the scale, right? Because I think in a few spaces as well, we're dealing with scale that's not necessarily common or comfortable in some spaces. Okay, let's take a look on the next page at a bit more detail around the kind of the enablers and what we can do and how. I think they're broad. Yeah, they cover a number of different areas. There are some things that we should probably focus on now, immediately, right? And things that we can defer by a couple of days. But I think the most important thing is that everyone I've spoken with in the past few months has almost universally highlighted one thing about their organizations, and that is that they've had an incredible experience in fast decision making as a COVID response. Yeah, and it's varied across industry, but we have seen decisions made and tools and infrastructure put in place in incredible in days and weeks and not years. This has been around enabling remote teams, right? Ensuring continuity of service, giving access to systems via remote kind of infrastructure, which hasn't been done before. Yeah. And that momentum we should capture, right? We should capture that momentum, the decision-making momentum that is sometimes not necessarily there, and really build on it, because the next thing we need to do is really answer our customers' needs. Okay, and here, if we look at the key kind of areas where we think there's a serious benefit, and in order to actually take advantage of the space and deliver the things, it's ways of working. Yeah, so how we work, what we get into, how the teams interact. A lot of it is around is based around end-to-end ownership and automation. Yeah, and I think really automation is probably the key lever. We're talking about rapid changes. We're talking about rapid kind of releases of software, typically, and services. It's really hard to do when there's a manual process, right? So the automation, DevOps practices, having frequent deployments, in some cases on a daily basis, right? It's a key factor in moving fast, right? And automation also gives you consistency. Yeah, computers are just better at repeating things than humans. To get all that in place, it's talent. Yeah. And obviously there's a bit of a technology focus. It's not exclusively engineers, right? We have a lot of other capabilities which are usually needed to deliver digital products. There are designers, product owners, and people like that. But strong engineers are critical. Yeah? And I'm sure we've all heard tales about 10x engineers and how incredibly productive they are. They really are. I've worked with a few, and it's amazing how one or two people can be more effective than an entire team, but it really happens. So having a few of those people on board is almost critical. Hard to find. There's a shortage of talent, but certainly worthwhile. They will then drive the engineering kind of agenda and the technology agenda to an extent. Okay. And then we have, of course, the infrastructure and the platforms and the tools that are available. Okay, and that is now more often than not in the cloud space. Okay, so I think public cloud providers are featuring more and more. So certainly in the across Europe, within the EU, all the three main players, they have data centers, so we're able to host data there. Okay, and they bring an incredible speed and scalability. Yeah, so I think if you compare the typical time that it can take to provision infrastructure, right? And sometimes the investments and the procurement processes that are needed to provision infrastructure for, especially for new products and new things, it's in the space of weeks, months, sometimes, right? Here with a public cloud provider, you could achieve the same thing in a matter of hours or days, right? So we're not even getting into weeks. I mean, we've had experience in creating solid production kind of grade public cloud infrastructure, certainly in under a week, right? Using 2 or 3 engineers. Yeah, so it's an incredible acceleration, incredible speed. And on top of that, the public cloud providers offer a certain scalability. Yeah. So we don't have to pre-plan infra in as many ways as we used to. We can actually scale it automatically depending on demand, right? And then on top of that, you have a number of kind of complementary services. So you can start to compose the technology space, right? Using that talent, yeah, and actually really build products and solutions very, very quickly. And those kind of 3 top things are probably the priority, right? In terms of putting the key building blocks in place to be able to really, digitize services, digitize products, and deliver those services to clients, right? As a first step, okay? The speed and flexibility also creates a space for innovation, right? So when the demands come in, when maybe sometimes ideas appear out of the blue, we don't need to dismiss them anymore, right? We can actually take advantage of them. So suddenly we can almost go from a space where we are coping, right, to a space where we're accelerating and innovating. Yeah. And that's it's an incredible ability to almost take advantage of the darkest times to an extent. Yeah. And first of all, help our clients, but also actually be how should we say, be the leaders in the new space, in the new normal, right? And then going from the immediate things, obviously, once we have the basic building blocks in place, there are a couple of other things that are extremely important, I think. So obviously, technology and tools, okay? The tools that we use, the tools that we use to help our processes, from engineering to deployment and through to kind of monitoring. There are some really good flexible tools out there, right? They tend to be services, but they are very easy to use and they maintain, use them. From a tech perspective, lightweight technologies, yeah. There's obviously a massive kind of open source community there at the moment, and we see more and more organizations adopting open source technologies in what they do, shying away from the kind of the larger, the larger, heavier technologies almost. That contributes to speed and flexibility massively. It gives a certain ability to to almost create faster increments and release those increments. Okay, and of course data and analytics. Yeah, as last but no means least, it is incredibly, I think, important to ensure that we are understanding how customers are behaving. We're understanding what they are using or not using. Okay, and adapting to that. Yeah. So building the data analytics capabilities into the products from day one, that allows us to understand what's happening in real time a lot of the time and adapt very, very quickly. So if you have the ability to adapt, if you have the skills and the technology, and you have the data that's telling you how to change, you can respond to needs very, very quickly. Okay, and all of those things put together, hopefully they enable us to actually react faster and digitize more of the services and products that we have. Okay, and I'll pause there.
So thank you very much, Anton. Thank you very much. It was a brilliant presentation, and I've lots of fruitful thoughts. So let me see. Agile, I really love it. You know, create tiger teams, absolutely sensational. Moving fast, act now to respond to your client demands. And I'm not sure if I understand exactly if you said that it's almost critical to have the CIOs in the board. And my question to you is, can we see that the role of the CIOs has been changed and become, you know, more strategic and even maybe critical role, at least in passing to this new normal and, you know, past the COVID time? What do you think about it?
I think agility starts at the top. Right, and if you look at the experience of most agile teams, and they work most effectively when they are truly cross-functional. Yeah, when there's real end-to-end ownership from client experience to business KPIs to technology in one team. I don't believe that's any different when you talk about leadership, because it's not about it's about a cooperation and collaboration fundamentally. There are different skills, different disciplines that work together, right? And it's only by working together very closely and having that kind of, you know, collaboration and open dialogue and co-ownership, right, where we can truly achieve great things. So I think, yeah, if the organization is run by a board, it should be collaboration at board level and down. I think the best organizations which we see are agile from the very top to the very bottom and across the board, right? They promote this collaboration, and they're usually a little bit flatter than, you know, more traditional hierarchical organizations as well. Yeah, but absolutely, I think equal expertise, different disciplines, but certainly need to work together. Yeah.
Just a 30 seconds answer. What do you see at McKinsey? The COVID time accelerated the cloud adoption?
I think now everyone is very much focusing on you know, in the first instance, everyone looks at coping. Yeah, it was firefighting. How are we going to cope in the new space? Now the question is, how do we adapt, how do we scale? And digital is obviously a massive space. I don't think the demand for digital services is going to drop. It's only going to increase, be it because of COVID or just because people have become used to it, right? So it will scale.
Anton Fortunatov from McKinsey Digital, thank you very much for being with us today. It was a real pleasure. Thank you, and I really appreciate McKinsey, and I hope we will have you on board in the next CIO Council sessions. Thank you very much, Anton.
Absolutely. Thank you for the time. It's been a pleasure.
We'll be back in a matter of seconds. Thank you.
Bye-bye.